Uh, Good evening. My name is Dr. Diem Mooney. I have a PhD in industrial relations psychology, but I refer to myself as a human experience psychologist. I'm also a parent and a spouse, which I've always felt to be, my primary role in life outside of my professional career. So, in regards to masculinity, I'd like to clarify, masculinity is not something that I've studied academically, aside from maybe one gender course in my undergrad. It's not something also that I've been involved with professionally as a psychologist. But based off of my own interpretation and my own lived experience, as someone who's very masculine presenting, I'd like to provide some thoughts on what masculinity is. So masculinity, in its very simplest form, it refers to demographic or characteristics of an individual that most closely aligns with men. I find the idea of masculinity to be very interesting, considering the fact that it is very tied to society or cultural norms, basically meaning that for one culture, something can be considered as masculine, but for another culture, it may not. So with this shift and change, it can be really hard, I suppose, for someone who ties themselves so closely to be considered masculine, to navigate different spaces with how much it can shift and change based off of individual perceptions or cultural perceptions of what masculinity is. So for me and my upbringing and again my lived experiences, things that social norms that I associate with masculinity are things like providing for my family. I thought it was very important that I bring in most of the income so that my wife would be able to have more freedom to take care of the children, or take on a career that she thought was more suitable for what she wanted to do and not have to worry about money. Another thing is simply being that stable head of household, making good financial decisions and all of that for my family, and taking care of my kid as a protector. So for me, that is something that I deem as being masculine. However, I found being around very strong women, very intelligent women, that those features and those characteristics are often associated with them as well. And they are very proud of their femininity. So it becomes something that's not as concrete or black and white as we may assume, even in those characteristics or traits that we most associate with men. So again, I've found that it's very, very fluid, and it changes, and so subjective what masculinity is, that we seem to tie our identity so closely to a very scoped or boxed in definition of it, and it can be very debilitating. It can also cause us to be somewhat fragile when our idea of masculinity is questioned or challenged. So again, that's my perception or my perspective of masculinity, and its fluidity. Especially coming from someone who is identified as non-binary, and I'm also autistic. So my perceptions of the world around me definitely differs maybe than others, in the way that I cognitively process information in the world around me. So that would be, again, summary of my definition of masculinity based off of an autistic psychologist.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Mooney.
No problem.